Chapter 7. I felt like I was out for hours. I woke up to an older, harder, and grayer version of what I remembered of Saul. He'd aged since the last time I saw him. Instead of the clean-cut uncle I once knew, he'd let his beard grow out, and it was as gray and unkempt as the hair on his head. It contrasted with the dark sweater he wore with dark jeans. As he scowled, clearly trying to make sense of what I was doing there, his lines around his fiery eyes deepened. Despite years that had passed since his wife's death, I noticed he still wore a thick gold band on his left hand. While I shook my head to try to get rid of the stars that were now all I saw, I realized I was staring down the business end of a gun. My gun. "Shut up, mutt, or I'll cut your head off," he yelled at Bruno. Bruno snarled and barked, flashing his teeth at Saul as he paced back and forth at my side. "Vince? What were you doing here?" he snapped, shouldering my rifle and offering me his hand to help me up. With surprising strength, he dragged me to my feet and inspected the back of my head where he had hit me. "It's nothing. You're fine." His split-second diagnosis was less than reassuring as the pain throbbed. "I didn't know where else to go," I said while snapping my fingers. "Stop it!" Bruno immediately stopped barking and sat next to me, never breaking eye contact with Saul. I reached up to where Saul had cracked me. My head pounded, and I could feel the lump already starting to rise out of my scalp. Things were getting real bad, and I couldn't stay in my apartment. I was running out of food, and all the stores in my area were picked clean. I rambled. I cringed at the pain from the hit. You're the only person I could think to stay with to wait it out. "You mind telling me what you were planning on doing with this?" he asked as he held up my rifle. "I wasn't sure that I was going to find you here," I said, in an attempt to sidestep the question. "So you thought it would be a good idea to shack up with me and bring your friend with you? Who is that, anyway?" he shouted, clearly still shocked it was me who broke into his house. "That's just Bruno. I was watching him when the crap hit the fan. We're kind of a package deal now. He's more useful than you would think. He always knows before I do if there are people around or if something's coming," I said, as Bruno let out a deep growl. "He's not a bad judge of character either." "No, not the dog," he said, pointing with his free hand. "Her." Stunned, I turned to follow his finger and saw a dirty, blonde girl walking toward us and dragging a bright red suitcase, a very impractical choice for the terrain and circumstances. As she got closer, I realized who it was. It was the girl I gave my cans of soup and beans to. She was wearing a tight black stocking cap, with curly hair spilling out from the bottom. It was her hair I recognized more than anything. I never did get that good of a look at her, but I would recognize her blonde curls anywhere. Despite the fact that her oversized hunting outfit was wet and dirty, she greeted us with a smile that could stop an army. Her deep green eyes were full of hope and kindness, the kind of eyes that could tell you a story. Her fair skin glowed as the last rays of the day faded behind the trees. Saul studied her for what seemed like an eternity, trying to make up his mind on what to do. I knew it would be a shock to see me on his doorstep. I could only imagine what was going through his head with the three of us there. The Saul I knew would never turn away anyone who was truly in need, but that was a long time ago, and he was clearly not the same man. She scrunched her forehead with the lingering awkward silence, probably wondering if she had made the right decision to follow me. I doubted she gave it much thought. She obviously left in a hurry to be able to keep up with me. It must have been her sails on the horizon. She probably aimed her boat in the direction I sailed. From there, it was just a matter of following my tracks in the beach and up Saul's driveway. The look on her face was all the explanation Saul needed to drop his guard. Looking at me with a deep scowl, he said, "Well, aren't you going to get her bags?" I started to object, but Saul wasn't the type of person you wanted to disagree with. I never understood why, but Saul was naturally drawn to certain people. There was one side he showed to the rest of the world, and one he saved for people who were in his inner circle. "Forgive my nephew. He's so rude at times he didn't introduce us. I'm Saul, he said with a smile, reaching out his hand to greet her. Lily, she said quietly. Lily, such a pretty name. You know, you look like a lily. As a matter of fact, I think that's what I'll call you. You mind me asking what brought you to my door? I didn't have many other options. She looked Saul square in the eye. It seemed like the right decision at the time. Well, trust me, you could have made worse ones. The house isn't as presentable as it could be, but you're welcome to make yourself at home. Saul gestured to the front door. But if you don't mind, Vince and I need to do some catching up. Saul turned and looked at me with a thoughtful expression. How long has it been? 5? 6 months? Almost 4 years, I corrected. So I'm right, we have a little catching up to do. He didn't even seem to register the discrepancy. A look of relief flooded her face, and she quickly disappeared into the house without a word. Who is she? Saul asked as soon as she was out of earshot. To be honest, I don't really know. I bumped into her when I was making my way up here, I said as I collected my pack and dusted off. I was clearly as stumped as he was. I gave her some food when I met her. She looked like she needed it, and all that canned food was slowing me down anyway. I guess I must have made a good impression. Must be my legendary charm. Well, it looks like she made good use of it. Saul handed back my rifle. So you're one of those kind of guys? What? The world gets a little hairy, then all of a sudden you turn into some kind of gunslinger. He nodded toward the rifle. It's good to know I'm not the only one who's paranoid. Suddenly feeling awkward, I slung the rifle around my back as Saul chuckled. Relax, Tex. I'm just teasing you. Just make sure you don't shoot yourself with that thing. He slapped me on the back as he changed the subject. I understand getting out of the city. I hate cities. I didn't need the excuse of a flu outbreak to leave. You know, I didn't move all the way out here to suffer the plague of unwanted visitors dropping by on a whim. The roads around here are all seasonal. You know what that means? It means it takes real effort to knock on my door a good chunk of the year. Why do you think I came here? Do you even know what's going on out there? I asked sharply. If the flu doesn't kill you, starvation or the people around you will. Staying put at my apartment was simply not an option for me. I've heard the stories. But to be honest, as long as it doesn't spill into my house, I couldn't care less about it. But cities are not where you want to be right now. Ever since people started starving, they've really turned on one another. The town sealed itself off. No one in or out. The farmers in the area all know each other and do what they can to help one another out. But the thing about people around here is that almost everyone hunts and keeps a good stash of bullets and other supplies on hand, he said as we walked around the wall. It's not like there are a lot of stores right down the road. So when you go to town, you stock up on whatever you need. We reached the gate to the courtyard that was previously locked, and Saul pulled out a small chain that had an old skeleton key and unlocked the gate. It creaked and groaned as we slowly forced it open. At first, the ivy refused to give up its hold on the gate, but in the end it surrendered and let us pass. Why did you plant ivy? I asked. Doesn't it ruin the stone? Eventually it's going to be a problem. I'll be dead by then, he said, seeming unconcerned. I decided on a stone exterior because I wanted the house to be able to protect itself from harsh winter storms and the scorching summer heat. I'm sure it can handle a little ivy. Besides, that adds to the character. That's just a little patina. As we walked, I followed Saul's lead blindly through the twists and turns of the maze as I filled him in on how I managed to make it up to him by staying, for the most part, out of sight. Saul walked through the maze as if he had memorized it inch by inch. I distractedly rambled and tried to make mental notes about the path, though I was sure I'd be lost for a while if I attempted to pass through it without Saul. He led me straight from an exit to a stone staircase and up to the top of the wall. We stopped there and looked out to the west, where the sun had once been. Off in the distance, we heard faint rumblings of a fall thunderstorm as I completed the rest of my tale. Well, you were right to come up by me. He shook his head. It was risky, but I could see where the risk was worth it. All we have to do is wait it out. It's not like this is the first time the world experienced a pandemic, I said confidently. That's true, but a lot has changed since then. He turned to walk toward the house. People have changed, most of all. I'm just surprised she was able to follow me all this way without me noticing, and that she even was able to make the trip, I said, trying to twist my head around it. Just then, the lights popped on, and we could see through the window that Lily was walking up the stairs from the basement. I guess she's not shy. She already figured out how to turn the power on. I had the upstairs closed off. It's been years since I've even been up there. From the main floor up was all Danielle. Everything about it reminds me of her. Saul hesitated at the threshold of the door before finally entering the great room. Ah, Lily, my dear, there you are, Saul said jovially as he tried to put her at ease. Lily sat on a couch in the living room, clutching her bag uncomfortably. Anything you need, anything at all, don't hesitate to ask. I'll not have a guest of mine go without. Actually, she squeaked as Saul was about to leave the room, you wouldn't happen to have a toothbrush I could have, do you? I sort of left in a hurry, and, well, it's been a couple of days, and, well, my teeth feel like they're wearing sweaters. Saul blinked, not quite sure what to make of the comment. Sure. Let me just check and get a room ready for you to stay in. Saul darted up the stairs, leaving Lily and me in an awkward silence. The room itself didn't help things. It was great for parties, but was very uncomfortable otherwise. The big space and the Gothic arches overhead gave it a creepy feeling. It only added to the tension in the room. What's up? I said to Lily in an effort to break the ice. She met my eyes as she sat on the covered furniture and said, Nothing. What's up with you? Nothing, I replied. Having come full circle back to it being awkward again, the only sound was Bruno's heavy breathing as he sat between us and glanced back and forth during the short conversation. That was quite the ride up here. Honestly, I'm a little surprised we made it, she said. Yeah, it was something else, I agreed. So, what made you follow me? I asked finally after Bruno just gave up and lay down between us. Well, it's kind of a long story, she said hesitantly. It was just me and my father. Like most people, we didn't have large stockpiles of food or anything like that when the virus hit. We did our best to buy and collect what we could from the surrounding stores, but when the news started covering all the different places that the flu hit, every store we went to was packed full of people loading up their carts, and little was left on the shelves. It wasn't long before the food started to run low, and I really started to worry. Lily fumbled at her bag, pulled out a picture, and handed it to me. It's an old picture, but it's one of my favorites. That's me and my dad on my first camping trip. She pointed to a smaller, younger version of herself roasting marshmallows over a campfire with a stick. And that's my dad, sitting next to me. So what happened to him? I asked. Never mind. You don't have to answer that. No, it's okay, she said, stuffing the picture back into her bag. We made the best of things in our house. We just rationed what we had and stretched it out as far as we could. We sat around the house and watched movies while we waited, and kept a close eye on the news to see if there was a break in what was going on. But every time we turned on the TV, things seemed like they were just getting worse. Crime was going up, people were getting desperate, not to mention more dangerous. Just normal people, not evil, just hungry. Anyway, we were just about out of food and getting desperate ourselves. Lily was clearly bothered by the story as she looked down at her feet and tried to compose herself. He went out and didn't come back, she said. We sat in silence while I tried to decide if I should say something, but nothing came to mind. I had some idea of what she was feeling. Saul was the only family I had left, but we spoke so rarely that the bite of loneliness I felt when my mom died never really faded. Actually, like most houses on the block, our house was broken into, she finally said once she composed herself. When I woke up to the sound of someone breaking the kitchen window, I shot out of bed and immediately went to my closet. There, in the ceiling, was the only access to the attic, and I hid there for what seemed like forever until I was sure they had gone. I finally came down, and not long after, I met you in the backyard. I thought you were just another raider until you tossed me your food. I could hardly believe it when I looked inside and saw how much there was. The fact that you left it for me really said a lot about you. Little acts of kindness these days mean a lot more than they once did. She bent over to pet Bruno. He immediately snapped to attention and shimmied himself into a better position for her to scratch his head. Yeah, that sounds like me. Sometimes I even impress myself, I said jokingly, in a poor attempt to lighten the mood. I thought about her story and realized that her loss was still fresh to her. She couldn't have lost her dad that long ago. So, then you just packed your bags and hot-tailed it out of there and decided to follow me? You seemed like you had a plan. Anything was better than what I had to work with. Even with the food you gave me, I knew I wouldn't last long. Between that and all the robberies, I'd have to leave eventually. I grabbed the warmest of my dad's hunting clothes off the hook by the door. But I didn't linger. It sounded like a war zone outside, and I couldn't get out of there fast enough. With my father gone, I had no reason to stay. Besides, it's not like you were hard to follow. I caught a glimmer of sarcasm from her as she smirked. I just went east as fast as I could and made it to the marina just in time to see you getting on that boat and sailing away. By the way, just because a boat is big doesn't mean it's necessarily better. Sometimes it's just bigger. I grabbed the little boat that was next to it and was able to follow you easy enough, she said with a glimmer of pride in her eyes. You were never really out of sight. I could see your sails on the horizon. I guess I failed miserably at keeping a low profile. And about the boat, I didn't know how long I'd be on it. Bigger is better for long trips. Well, it also stood out like a sore thumb on the horizon, and FYI, sound carries very far over water. The few times I thought I lost sight of your boat, I could hear your dog barking, and at times I could hear talking. She was wringing her hands nervously. Who were you talking to, anyways? Oh, nobody. Just Bruno, I said. I can't believe you could hear that. Does he ever answer back? She asked, eyeing me suspiciously. I looked at Bruno as his head darted back and forth between the two of us. His expressive eyes gave the illusion that he understood more than we gave him credit for. No, of course not. That would be weird. Lily relaxed noticeably. I see, so talking with a dog isn't weird? I thought about that statement for a moment. No, not really. Well, it gave me something to aim for. Then, during the day, your sails glowed on the horizon. I didn't take my sails down once the whole trip. In one of the compartments on the boat, there was an auto helm. I just set it and let it ride the whole time. I slept on the back and ate the soup you gave me until I saw your boat anchored off of that beach. I also saw your footprints in the sand. My boat didn't have an anchor. Weird, considering that would be something you would expect all boats to have. I tried to hide my guilt as she continued. So then I just cranked up the keel and sailed right up onto the beach. It's a tough little boat, and I figured if I needed to go anywhere, I could push it back in the water. Or just steal yours. She smiled, dusted the dog hair off her hands, and sat back on the couch. Bruno sat up and put his greedy blockhead on her lap, begging for more attention. If nothing else, Bruno was very persistent. He's such a pretty dog. Bruno stood up and started to get a little excited when he saw her grab his ball out of his backpack. He's really just a drone. He's easily manipulated. Watch, I'll show you. I snapped my fingers and Bruno immediately turned to face me. I command you to sit, beast. I said as Bruno's butt dropped to the ground without hesitation. Wow, what a good dog. Lily was clearly not impressed. But he's easily distracted, I said, snapping my fingers on either side of his head. Bruno's head shot back and forth, obviously confused. There's not a lot going on between his ears. If you listen real close, you can hear his brain buzzing as he tries to think. But you're right, he is a good dog. Anyway, from there I just followed the road until I saw tracks that looked fresh heading up this driveway. I never thought houses like this existed anymore. He lives here by himself? Yeah, I'll let him tell you the story. It started off as a smaller house, and as he puts it, he built it bigger out of necessity. I rolled my eyes. Something about his mother-in-law. What does he do for a living? She asked as she unzipped and removed her dirty jacket. He was an architect, I replied, kicking off my boots. But if you asked him, he would tell you he was an entrepreneur. I asked him once to clarify, and he said he looked for, found, and jumped on opportunities. He must have been very successful to afford all this. She looked around the room. It isn't just that, I corrected. He owned his own planning, design, and consulting firm. I think he employed hundreds of people. They designed skyscrapers and larger projects. Also, my aunt was an oil heiress. He has since sold his businesses. Now, I don't exactly know what he does with his time. Just then, Saul came down the stairs carrying a pile of clothes. You look about her size, he said as he handed it to Lily. You guys must be tired. Lily, I cleared a spot for you in the master bedroom. I never got rid of Danielle's clothes, so you're welcome to whatever you need. Lily accepted the stack as she gave Saul a hug that threw him off before he hesitantly returned the gesture. Thanks for everything. She darted upstairs with Bruno closely following her. Bruno, leave her alone, I called out after him, but he ignored me as if I was dead to him. I guess he's a good judge of character, she said just before disappearing up the stone stairs. Wow, she's something all right. You barely know her, and your dog prefers her company to yours, Saul said as he sat down across from me. Not that I blame him. I feel the same way. He's not my dog. I just ended up with him. Besides, he doesn't know what's good for him. There's not a lot of action going on between his ears, just a big dumb animal. Once she learns how bad he snores, she'll kick him out soon enough. Well, sleep well. You have a lot to do in the morning, Saul said, yawning. Like what? You'll find out in the morning. I looked around at my surroundings numbly. The leather furniture looked less than inviting with their dusty sheets over them. Where do you want me to sleep? Don't care. Anywhere but the master bedroom or the room next to the wine cellar. Why? What's wrong with that one? Nothing, he shouted as he made his way down the stairs. That's my room. Exhausted, I picked myself up off the couch and slowly made my way downstairs to Saul's domain. The decor of the house changed dramatically once I reached the lower level. It went from historic castle to modern and clean. The only materials were concrete, glass, and steel. The basement was clean and well kept, clearly where Saul had made his home recently. The stairs opened up to a large room with a polished concrete floor and glass dividers that separated the rec room, bar area, and gym. Off the main room, there was a classic marquee to an old movie theater complete with ticket counter. On either side of it were two large framed movie posters. His favorite was to the right, an oversized print of the original King Kong from 1933. And on the left was Danielle's favorite movie poster, Charade. I liked King Kong, but I was never able to sit through all of Charade, no matter how great Aunt Danielle made it sound. The sitting area had black leather furniture with a boxy look. It all surrounded a large flat-panel TV. Saul was a big sports fan, and they both liked movies, especially classic ones. I always thought it was a waste of money watching an old black-and-white movie in a theater that was made up of only the best electronics. To me, it was like driving a Ferrari 10 miles under the speed limit. Danielle refused to have any TVs in her area of the house, so Saul made up for it down here. Somehow, the only area he was able to design without any of her input was the basement. I found the closest couch and dumped my gear next to it. I sat down and kicked off my boots, instantly feeling more comfortable. On more than one occasion during my journey here, I had wished I grabbed the running shoes. Leaning back on the couch, I thought back on the trip. All the worries and anxieties were now replaced with exhaustion and a sense of accomplishment at having made it. On solid ground, surrounded by high walls, thick doors, and a long way off from anything that resembled a town or city, an overwhelming sense of calm flooded over me. It washed away all the tension from the trip and fears of starvation or infection, and somehow the rest of the world's problems seemed as though they were unable to touch me. Since arriving, I felt like I shrugged off an unbearable weight that had been crushing me up until that point. With the tension lifted, I drifted to sleep, not knowing or caring what new challenges I would be faced with in the morning. Regardless of what they might be, I found comfort knowing I would face them ready, and that I wouldn't be alone.